Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes for people to log in, and then we'll get started.
Hi, Zane Zabalin, CHR on the healthcare space, and I am excited about today's conversation. So we're talking about workplace experience perspectives in 24, and what I'm most excited about is we're actually shifting the perspective and coming from the employee perspective with respect to communications, technology, employee experience, reservability in a hybrid environment. So many of the times we're talking to HR leaders. Today we've mixed it up and we're coming from what's the employee feel as they go through these things, looking at the present and the future. So we're going to deep dive on what the experience looks like in 24, communication tools, hybrid environments, and reservations or reservability, rooms, parking spots, etc. Tools and strategies to future-proof the organization, and any new issues that are currently unanticipated. Today's session is co-hosted between Connex and AppSpace. So why don't I turn it over and let the team introduce themselves for the panel today. So Thomas, why don't I go to you?
Hi, everyone, and hi, Zane. I am Thomas, Chief Innovation Officer at AppSpace. I spend a lot of my time meeting with customers, understanding their challenges, upcoming challenges, and making sure that we design a product or solutions that can help them. Fun fact about myself, I live in Costa Rica. At least it's fun for me.
My name is Alexa Sandella. I'm a digital communications manager for corporate communications here at Eaton. I manage digital experiences, digital signage, and the overall employee experience on how they use those platforms and best practices.
Thanks, Zane. Michael Prischula. I'm managing director at Accenture and run a practice here called Intelligent and Digital Workplaces. And what myself and my team have the pleasure of doing is working with our clients around the world to integrate digital technologies into physical space. So all the technologies that are used to run the office, used to provide employees the digital tools that they need to get their jobs done while they're here and also while they're at home are all the fun things that we get to help them with. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk a little bit about that.
So you can see from the panelists, we've got an innovation officer, we've got digital workspaces, communications. I'm really looking forward to where this conversation goes today. So let's jump in and get started. So first, we're in an era of communication fatigue. It's just, we are inundated with too much information every day, and it's hard to prioritize and figure out what's meaningful and what we should be focused on. How can we use communication tools to deliver the right information at the right time without adding to the noise?
So I think when we are talking about any kind of communication tools, we need to really focus on who our target audience is and understanding what is the message that we want to give to them, and what is the best avenue to deliver that message, because not all employee is the same, and how we are communicating them shouldn't be the same across the board. So once we understand who that target audience is, we can then put a communication tool to that message and develop a strategy on what works best for them on delivering the message and making sure that they actually see it. So for an example here at Eaton, we use digital signage to reach a lot of our shop floor workers who may not have a reason to get on a computer at any time during the day. They may not even have an email address. So if we have important company-wide communications that need to go out to them, well, how are we reaching them if we're not sending them an email? So we use something like digital signage to promote and do different communication campaigns across a lot of different areas. But that's one way that we're reaching people that otherwise may not receive, an email or be part of some kind of Microsoft Teams or something like that. So that, and, when we're choosing our audience, I think with the oversaturation pieces as a communicator, we think, well, we need to put this message out on every single platform that we have, and that's where we feel that fatigue, right? That repetition. So just going back to your target audience, who it is you're trying to reach, and what is the best way to get to them, picking the top maybe one or two tools that they'll actually be able to see.
Alexa, do you track consumption? Who's getting what message where, what's most relevant or valuable for you?
It's through some different metrics we can see, overall usage. As far as which employee types, we do have some around what we call connected employees and unconnected, and that's based on like email addresses, Microsoft accounts, that sort of thing. So with the digital signage, it is a little bit harder to know how many employees are actually seeing like what's on the screen. But we do have some methods to be able to track how many of our manufacturing sites around the globe are using any one particular piece of content.
Very good. Thomas, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I think what Alexa was mentioning is really spot on. The communication fatigue in the corporate space comes because there's probably a misuse of the communication channels we have. And in the consumer space, we're really talking about communication campaigns, where specific content will reach specific users at specific time of the day based on their location, their gender, their ethnicity, and so forth. And I think in the corporate space, we're starting to get there as well. We're trying to narrowcast message to the right audience, use different communication channels to create awareness, but not have every communication channel provide 100% of the information. It's more bridging the different communication channels. So digital signage is a high impactful communication channel. It reaches people. It's very impactful. Then what's the call to action? And the call to action is probably to scan a QR code and go into an employee app or into the internet to read additional information and get more context. And I think it's the connection between the communication channels and the right campaign pattern that you define that really removes the fatigue and instead replaces efficient communication. So it's a challenge, but I think as we start looking at the way the consumer space handles it and apply some of those rules in the corporate space, we're actually going to see a lot of optimization.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add on to that too, Zane, but both to what Alexa said and Thomas, but we're seeing also, especially when it comes to something like signage, not just blasting the same message out everywhere, right? Context is important. And instead of just sending out the same message to every screen throughout the entire day, right? Maybe it's also tuning when certain messages are delivered. As an example, showing information about events that are happening today is important in the morning. It's not necessarily important at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after all of those events have happened. And so maybe it's, tuning the messages about today in the morning, but in the afternoon, it's more about what's coming up later on this week, so that we're not continually looking at the same information over and over. And it's more contextual to where the employee is during the day or during, whatever work cycle that they're going through at the time.
We're talking about challenge and change and being flexible. So change is hard. What are the persuasive techniques, communication techniques that drive tool adoption and minimize the resistance that come with new processes? Michael, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, change is always difficult for everybody, right? We're all creatures of habit. And so I think, I suppose it's expanding on the point I mentioned before, is making sure that we can tailor the messages to land with people in the workflow that they're going through during that day. Being able to look at when we're receiving those messages, the platforms we're receiving them on, and, where they are throughout, the process that I'm going on in the day. It may be I walk into the lobby of a building or one of the floors, and one of the first things that I'm probably doing in the workflow of that activity is I'm looking for a desk or I'm looking for an office. And so having information about how I can find those things or what's available is important to me at that point in time. But when I walk into the cafeteria, for example, maybe things about what's the specials of the day, or what's going on from in the menu, or what might be sold out in the cafeteria in the afternoon is important. From a change perspective, what that helps with is I'm not being forced to do things in a new way. It's actually the information is coming to me naturally, and I'm not forced to. It's more being fed to me in a very natural way for me to consume, as opposed to saying, "Hey, we're taking away this, or we're implementing this new tool, and this is the only way to use it." It's just becoming I can kind of consume those services more from an osmosis perspective rather than a hard cut from one thing to another.
We talk about the value of just-in-time training. So you're actually applying that to the employee experience when they need something, where they need it, meet that need.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's we can waste so many cycles with blasting information out to people that have no relevance to what it is that they're doing at this point in time. It's better to really focus and understand what it is that they're doing at that point in the day, in that point of the building, in that point in the factory, and feed them that relevant information at that point in time.
That's great. Alexa, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I'm thinking, when we have any kind of new tools and we're trying to get people excited about or understand, what is the value add to the specific tool, always just trying to give them the why behind why we're adopting a new tool, why we're changing something, why we're giving them something new to learn. I have found that when we can give the reasoning behind maybe part of the strategy, maybe there's a leadership objective that we're trying to meet, whatever it may be, let your users understand why this tool is coming about, how it's going to help them, how it's going to enhance their experience. And I've seen that it increases adoption when people actually know what the strategy is behind something, rather than just saying, here, go use this, without some additional context.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to shift it a little bit. So I had a reservation last weekend, and now with reservations, if you don't cancel them, they actually impose a charge on you, which is fascinating looking at the reservability of resource. So in a hybrid work environment where you're doing hoteling space or even parking spots, how, from an employee perspective, how is this working, and how do we look at this hybrid reservability and boosting employee experience perspective? So, Michael, you want to start there?
Yeah, sure. Within our own organization, Accenture, we've been doing desk reservation now for close on 20 years. We were one of the early adopters in the industry of it. And there's definitely, we see it in two ways. And I think some of this goes back to what Alexa was saying also about change, is there's got to be some value in it for the people to behave in a certain way. And instilling it in the culture of how the office runs, of how people consume and share resources, getting them to a point where they can understand that, if we're going to share things and we're going to check in and check out of things and maybe only book the resources for the period of time that we need, we're able to provide even more services in the workplace and more services in the office when we can apportion out the limited resources that we do have. As an example, here today, I'm in New York at the moment. I booked the meeting room here to do this call only for 2 hours of the day, and the rest of the day I'll be out on the floor in a normal desk, working in the office or in a cafe or something like that. So there's definitely a cultural aspect to it, but we know that in doing that, we also have the availability of more resources when we actually need them, as opposed to if people to come in and book a room for an entire day, never use it. It drives resource scarcity, which is no good for anybody. So it's definitely a learning curve. It's a bit of a carrot and a stick thing, but it is definitely a cultural aspect to how you operate the workplace.
Thomas, you want to add on there?
Yeah, there's probably a lot to add. The value is certainly what we heard in the previous questions, and what value does it bring to the employee? Now, when you're traveling and you're going to go to a different country, you're going to reserve your hotel. You're not going to assume there's going to be space in a hotel. You book it. And why do you book it? Because then you ensure you have the right hotel on the right floor, the room with the right amenities that you need, and in the additional services you need. And that's just a habit in the consumer space. Same thing when you're booking a restaurant, you want to make sure you have the right table with the best view. So there's no reason why it would be any different for the workplace. I'd rather book the meeting room that meets my needs, book the desk that has those 2 monitors and the docking station so I can just plug in and it works. So when you enable reservation services, you've got to think about the value you're bringing back to the user. And the other thing around value is in the consumer space, when you plan ahead, the app you're using or the service you're using can anticipate your needs. So when I book a hotel, the app that I use to book the hotel is going to ask me if I need a taxi transport from the hotel, from the airport to the hotel. It's going to anticipate my needs. Well, when I'm booking a desk in the office, the system should tell you, do you need a smart locker to store your personal belongings? Do you need a parking place for your electric vehicle? So reservation actually allows us to bring additional value to the user. And that word value that I'm sure we're going to hear a lot throughout this conversation is really what we should keep in mind when we're trying to implement new services.
Keep that and twist it slightly. So how do you do this? Who owns it? How do you set up best practices around policies and procedures? How does that work? You just referenced like 4 things when you reserve a room. I mean, some of that is IT, some of it is room reservations or space, some of it's HR. How do we manage that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Zane. And I think that we've seen this in the industry across the board since COVID. There's been a much bigger focus on hospitality in the workplace, and really shifting the way that we think about providing services to employees in the same way that hotels do, right? Traditionally, in the corporate world, we've said, oh, this is an HR thing, that's an IT thing, that's a workplace thing, that's something to do with the building owner. But where we've seen it work so much more successfully, even with encouraging people to come and consume services in the office, is where the service is focused on the person, right? And when you can get all those groups within the organization to function as one and be like a concierge service, the same way that it is when you go and check into a hotel for the room, the person at the front desk is there to help you with whatever it is that you want, right? They may not be the person that's going to say, get you some extra soap or tell you what fix a Wi-Fi problem that you've got, but they're going to own getting that resolved for you. Right. And so what we've seen is when you start taking this more hospitality focus to the delivery of service, it abstracts from the employee the need to care about whose problem it is. So we kind of abstracting that from whose responsibility is it to get it done from who's going to own the problem on behalf of the employee, with the function of the office to be there to service the employee to do whatever it is that they came in to do.
I'm coming out of healthcare. It's I love everything being said here. I fantasize about going in and having it anticipate my needs. How do you come at it from an affordability standpoint? Employee centricity and making it easy on the employee is wonderful. I'm not sure it's where the investment case usually goes. How do you argue that?
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily means more people. I think it means a change in mindset of the people that are servicing. Right? It's not saying that I have to have an extra layer of people. It's that having the people that are on the front lines, like you still have an IT service desk, you still have somebody in workplace, you still have a facilities person, having their mindset change and having them think about, I'm here to service the employee, and having those teams work together more seamlessly than they traditionally have been, is where we have found a lot of success. And some of that's in the people that are staffed in those types of roles. But when those teams work together and function as one in the background behind the scenes, is where we found a huge amount of success in people really enjoying the experience in the office and really having it a place that they feel like when they come to consume that facility that they've reserved, that they're going to be able to be productive and get the tasks that they came into the office done successfully.
I like the direction.
Yeah, maybe just to add just 2 seconds, and maybe Alex, I can validate, but while a few years back, I would meet with customers and I would either meet with facilities or HR independently or AV. Today, when I'm meeting with customers, I'm meeting with workplace experience teams that are made of IT, AV, HR, comms. They all come together. And like Michael mentioned, they put the team member back at the center. and they work together in providing the user experience. Now, the fact that you have multiple stakeholders together around the team member means that when you decide on implementing a new service, a new solution, a new experience, you're sharing the cost amongst the different groups. It's not everyone paying for their own solutions and they're therefore paying multiple times. It's one group of people sharing the cost of an experience that they're implementing for the team member. And I think that actually reduces the cost instead of increasing the cost. So you provide more experience, more value to the team member, and you're reducing the operational and CapEx that you need to pay simply because you're sharing it across the organization.
You look at the value, the increased engagement, the improved retention. There's a lot there. I'm looking forward to, as this takes more hold in the market and there are more articles published on it, hopefully it's just a trend that sweeps, which would be really fun to see. Speaking of fun to see, future proofing has been a big conversation point, and now that it's gotten so much notoriety, I'm going to remove it from my resume because it's too much of a buzzword. So what does it really mean with respect to workforce technology? And what are some of the pitfalls you see with the selection of tools and the long-term thought process? Thomas, you want to start that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to start there. I think the pitfalls not to fall in are trying to do exactly what I said earlier, what we were doing a few years back, where HR would look for a solution that addresses their needs and do that in silo, and then facilities would look for something else. And you would implement a lot of different solutions that work in silos and that you have to operate independently one from another. I think this is changing. I think the fact that we now have workplace experience teams inside large organizations allows to look at the team member experience as one thing and not multiple little things working independently one from the other. And I think it's probably and again, I'd love to hear from Alexa around it, but I think that's the trend now, is working together to find a solution that works as one and not independently, so you can optimize cost and improve the team member experience.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with all of that. We're just kind of coming back to the end user and understanding what their experience maybe has been with a similar tool in the past, and what are their challenges, what do they like, what they don't like, and taking that feedback to, as when we're looking at new technologies, what are we going to implement, or what maybe we want to stay away from based on what their feedback has been. And we can only get that through collaboration methods. I also think it's important to look at the overall complexity of the tool and what is the ease of use for the end user. How quickly will they be able to learn and adopt on using it? So I think we do want to keep looking for simplicity as we're bringing on new technologies and kind of looking towards the future on what those things may be. And then just one other point to add is understanding what our existing tools are, or as we're picking new tools, is there ability to upgrade or enhance them in the future? Because it's going to be really hard for your end user to kind of bounce around from this next great thing, right? If we're completely changing platforms and processes, we need to understand what this capability is today, and can we add on to it in the future that you're already familiar with kind of the base platform. You're just kind of learning maybe new bits and pieces as the years go by and technology changes.
Very good. So let's go there. Next best thing or next great thing. Boy, we're all talking about AI now. I mean, go 2 years back or maybe a year and a half and it was in its infancy. Where are we now? So it's top of mind for everyone. Let's go even further into the future. So what's one under the radar tech trend that's going to change workplace dynamics over the next 5 years? Michael, you want to start, and then we'll probably go around the horn on this one, because I think we all want to hear what you've got.
Yeah, sure, Zane. I think the biggest thing that has come out of, I have to say, since the post-COVID time now, is specifically when it comes to the workplace, is we've realized how much data we didn't have on what was happening in the workplace, about how much, what spaces were being consumed, how busy the offices were when people were coming in, who they were, what services they were consuming. And so we're in this period right now where we're gathering data and we're putting in ways to get more, let's call it accurate information, and not so much data that was anecdotal. And at the end of the day, the AI trend that we're on at the moment, and it's becoming a buzzword for everybody. But the reality is, it's only as good as the data that you're going to feed it. And so I think over the next 5 years, we've still got a way to go, specifically on the real estate and the workplace side of things, of getting data, especially in large portfolios, of getting consistent, reliable data to be able to feed into these models. Because even if we have models and we have what we think is data, the data across different offices, different workplaces, different types of employees is so disparate right now. I use the term like the AI is not going to save you from having terrible data. So the next 5 years, I really see we've got this vision of what AI is capable of getting to, but we have to go through this process of getting consistent data for it to actually be able to use to be able to deliver on the promise that it has for us.
That might have been the most wise 5 words I've said in weeks. Solange, I see your question, the Q&A. For any questions that are coming up, please throw them in the Q&A. We're going to save them for the end, and we hope to get to 3 or 4 of them at least. But Thomas, why don't I turn it over to you to answer?
No, I mean, I think, like Michael says, the next 5 years are going to be key. The data we're going to get, what we're going to do with the data. If we focus on the team member experience, I think intent-based is going to be huge. So I don't see why today, when I want to book a desk, I have to go through a number of filters and menus to get to that desk. I think I should be able just to say what I need. I need a desk for 4 hours today, with a view on New York and close to the elevator. And just based on that, the system is able to provide recommendation of resources and just book them. Or even one that I can't believe we haven't solved yet is I need a meeting with Alexa and Michael in the next 2 weeks for 30 minutes. We need to have an in-person meeting to brainstorm. The system should be able to find a day we're all going to be at the same location, a time in our calendar where we're all going to be available, a meeting resource that's free for us to host with a whiteboard so we can brainstorm. And it should just go ahead and do the booking for me. And I mean, I can see you, Zane, waving your hand. That's the nightmare number 1 for me in the morning is booking meetings. And that's why I think everyone's doing virtual and staying home, because it's easier than in person, and the system needs to solve that. And I think AI and data that Michael was referring to is going to help address this. So I think there's a lot coming in the next few years, and it's really going to be centered around optimizing the team member experience and solving problems so they can be more productive, more engaged to the workplace and to their team members.
Oh, that's great. Simplicity and ease. Oh, boy, anticipate our needs and do it for us. That would be outstanding. Alexa, did you have anything to add there?
It's kind of off the topic of exactly what Thomas and Michael had mentioned, but just another area that I think we're going to see an increase on, and that's going to change the workplace dynamic, is more around focusing when we're finding like just new talent in the industry, focusing on skills development rather than the college degree, so to speak. And I think as technology evolves and employee experience evolves, we're going to have to come up with ways to be able to have more learning and development programs with this talent pool to bring them, upskill them to where they need to be with all of the technology pieces, parts, tools that we have. But I think that we're going to see a lot more in that space coming in the next several years.
I was just in a conference last week, and they had this exact conversation about, do you want somebody who's got the accreditation behind the skill, or somebody who's actually gone on and done virtual learning for 100 more hours who shows proficiency but doesn't have the degree? So
Right.
It's going to be a big game for us to play for the future. And boy, I've said this as I'm hiring, I will hire somebody with hunger any day over like a GPA. But now when you really put that to a pressure test, can we do skill-centric hiring versus the total profile of an employee? It's going to be interesting. We said next 5 years. Very good.
Yeah.
We talk about maximizing the return on investment. How do we know if new tech investments are truly paying off? What are the key metrics that you're leveraging besides adoption? Michael, you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. I suppose that all depends on what the tech is and the reason that you're putting it in. I'm a big proponent of, tech for tech's sake is a waste of money. We need to understand what it is that we're trying to solve with it, and how we're going to measure success before we start investing in dollars in it. Now, some of that may be just about how do we get people more informed, how do we make them feel more connected to the organization, around messaging and information that we're sending out. But some of the other things that we're talking about here have some real hard measurements around them, right? How much more utilized is the space that we're paying for? We're paying hundreds of dollars a square foot for space in New York or London. How often is that space sitting empty? What if we were able to optimize how many people or how consumed that space is on a day-by-day basis? Can that either increase or improve the amount of time that our employees are together, or can it enable us to save money by knowing that we can reduce space? Getting people more engaged to come out and participate in community building events and things like that. There's so many different ways to measure, the ROI, either from an increased value or from a savings perspective. But going in right up front, knowing what it is that you're trying to solve for, going and then executing some type of pilot or test program, getting the feedback, making sure that you can prove out that business case. And then, this is where we have so much success internally and with our clients is, you prove it out on a small scale, you can go back and prove that we're going to have that impact. And then it makes getting the money and getting the funding from the executive teams to deploy those things much broader, so much easier.
Let me ask a question, then we'll go around the horn. So I mean, COVID put us all in an interesting discussion around remote and hybrid, and we saw some productivity gains and some increasing engagement. What feels like was missing was collaboration, creativity, and innovation, and that was harder to pull off in a remote or hybrid environment. Have you seen a best practice in this space that worked really well? I mean, we've got kids who are doing MMPI games and collaborating with, my son plays with guys in Australia and Japan. So how can we learn from youth, or what are the best practices in this remote collaboration that are effective?
I mean, from our side of things, we've been working in a remote way for many years. I've personally been what you would probably consider a hybrid worker for more than 20 years now. Coming into the office to at certain times when I want to be or I need to be with colleagues, but then the times that I don't need to be there, being able to work remotely from home. Now, I think one of the challenges that we've had in the last number of years with people trying to measure things like, well, are we more productive in the office or are we more productive at home? I haven't seen a really good measurement of what that actually means, right? I think there's still a lot of it is anecdotal around we are better when we're together or we're better when we're apart, or like organizations like Atlassian saying, hey, we're way better when we're 100% remote. So I think it changes from organization to organization, but knowing what measurement is, or what again, very similar to the last question you asked, is what's the measurement you're going to use and how can you quantify what that is, to be able to justify what you're doing. But I think also one thing that we do know out of COVID is that people love connection and people want to be together. We don't always want to be apart, and when we do come together, we want to be able to be as productive as we can. So I suppose that's sort of what we're seeing in that space.
I took kind of a question set sideways with remote collaboration or innovation. Between Thomas and Alexa, anything you'd like to add there? And then I want to go back to the ROI, because that's a really important question that I'd like to hear your perspective on also. So anything on remote collaboration that you've seen effective?
Yeah, I have seen that, having just the different tools available. I'm going to use like Miro as an example because I like Miro. If you guys are familiar with it, it's a digital whiteboard, and using that in a number of ways to just get people from all over the globe to work on the project together, in whatever kind of time frame they have. But it's just one space that's kind of open. And you can come in and add your thoughts and your messages and your project plans and all these different pieces and parts and kind of work on the same thing, but during different times of day. So that's just one way that we're able to come together as a team to collaborate on a project. And also, I think just finding ways to make things fun, because also if we're always just having meetings and it's just always, the business side of things, I think maybe we tune out a little bit more, and that human element, that water cooler talk kind of goes out the window. So not just having a meeting just to have a meeting, but bring in some fun elements. Maybe you have a day where you have a meeting and you're doing virtual games together. Just again, building that team, having that bonding time, I think is really important in a remote work experience.
Thank you. Thomas, let's go back to the return on investment. How are you finding best ways and means of validating that?
I think return on investment is always hard because you have soft benefits and hard benefits, right? On the workplace management, it's a little bit easier. We see a lot of organization reducing their real estate and optimizing the usage of the workspace. Pre-pandemic, you would have each department would have a number of desks, a number of meeting rooms, and you would pay your fair part of that real estate based on what was assigned to you. Post-pandemic, it's much more about reservation, which means it's much more dynamic. But you still need to get departments to pay for their real usage. You can't charge everyone the same if you have a team that tends to be more remote versus on-site because it works better for them. Then you need to be. So I think having the data and being able to cross-charge based on your effective usage of the workspace is important. Then based on the effective usage of the workspace by an individual, being able to track their engagement level. When they're coming in the office, are they coming to sit at a desk, or are they, like Michael, having meetings in person? Because honestly, if they're only coming to sit at a desk, what's really the point, right? The goal of the workplace is for people to connect, because we know people love working for a company for the people they work with, not just for the company itself. So we've got to bring people back together. So figuring out a way to make sure that if I'm coming to the office today, I'm going to meet people. I'm not going to be just sitting at my desk. So I'm coming the right day when my team members are there. There are meetings that are organized. Like Alexa said, virtually there may be events, but on site, what are the events that are happening today where I can get people together? I think that's a little bit harder to measure. There's a retention and happiness and therefore productivity impact there, but how do you measure it? It's not that easy, which is where I think the third thing comes in place is every organization has an intranet, and an intranet is an important cost, but it's needed. It's the heartbeat of the organization, is the repository of the information. So a way to implement ROI is how do you bring more value back to the intranet? And for example, digital signage is a way to promote information that exists in the intranet and get the user faster to that destination. So becoming or using tools that amplify existing tools that are critical to the business, like an intranet, I think is a way to improve ROI. And again, how do you measure it? Based on number of views of an intranet page, pre-tech and post-tech, when you implement the QR code function, for example, reactions and things like that. A little bit harder to measure, but I think there are ways. Again, it's a combination of soft and hard benefits, and I think it's always hard there.
We used to talk about tangibles and intangibles in some of this intangible space, and how do you get it that, because we know it matters, but boy, it's hard to put a thumb on it. Alexa, anything you'd like to add on the ROI?
I think Thomas and Michael covered a lot of what I was thinking as well. Just overall, I think user satisfaction, surveys, feedback, just again, talking to the people that are using and seeing these things and getting their perspective off of it.
I'll just add one more thing. I think it rounds back out to one of the original points that Alexa said, right, is that one thing we know that doesn't work from an ROI perspective is just installing the tech and expecting that it's going to happen. Right. There's definitely a change management process. There's a communication process. There's slowly taking the employees on a journey from how they've been doing things before to the way that things are going to work in the future are key to the success of this. So definitely, the way to fail and to actually, not hit your ROI targets is to think that buying a tool and installing it and just starting to use it is going to make it happen magically. Right. There is a journey that you have to go on, but once you get to the end of that journey and you stick with it, you bring people along on that road. that's where you end up getting the real value. So not skimping out on the time it takes and the investment in taking employees on that change journey.
Perfect segue into the next question I had. So breaking tech silos is key, and we've talked about the perspective coming from the employee or the end user. Who owns the process in contemporary organizations? So what's the ideal collaboration model between, I mean, we've talked about HR, procurement, IT. So who owns that process, and how do you manage and set up the ideal structure for success? Thomas, you want to start?
Yeah, I think we covered it partially. I don't think it's one stakeholder anymore. It's a workplace experience team that is a combination of HR, IT, AV, facilities people working together. A lot of the projects that we implement today, from the RFP process all the way to launch date, are a combination of those people getting together and owning the overall team member experience and sharing the responsibility there. I think that's a huge shift, and it's amazing to think that today it's no longer called facilities or real estate, it's called workplace experience. It just tells you that it is about an experience. Like Michael mentioned, hospitality is an experience, and why would it be any different in the corporate space where we spend most of our time? So I think that's the big change. And I think it's very rare, the projects where we work with only one group of people.
Yeah.
Alexa, are you seeing the same?
Yeah, I'd have to definitely agree, especially like in the role that I'm in with digital communications. So I work very closely with like our HR teams who are using AppSpace to develop, digital signage content that's going to display at their site location where they work at. And so they have that immediate, they're seeing what the employees are, reacting to that content, but they come to me letting me know like, hey, we need help with this sort of feature, or we would like to do this, but we don't know how, or this feature doesn't exist. Can you help us? So I take that information in my role as communications and then go back to IT and I say, hey, HR, these people are seeing this, issue or problem. What can we do to resolve it? And it's kind of that feedback loop where we're all working together to solve a need. And that I just keep thinking back to like just agile project management overall. That's really what we're doing. We're finding an issue or a need, and we're working through various iterations and refining the process to make this end product, whatever we're looking for, to be the best that it can be. But it's continuous. We never gonna get to that end point. We're like, yep, ta-da, we're done. Forget about it. I think at some point with any kind of technology, we're always coming back to it. We're always finding something that needs to be refined a little bit further, but it's through that collaboration and feedback process in order for us to make that happen.
So agile process or change management, thinking like Michael was saying. So we've kind of touched on this, especially Thomas, with you talking about the harder softer skills. We referenced the intangibles. Technology is usually about efficiency. So how are we measuring the softer impact on the workforce? What are the ways and means you're doing that? I mean, engagement survey is just not going to cut it. Psychological safety, trust metrics. I don't know that gets it. What are you seeing that actually really taps into if we're getting it right in this space?
I'm happy to start on that one. I right now at AppSpace, we're in this concept of we've got to consumerize the workplace experience. And because it's so much friction and it's such a selfish environment when you think about it, it's all about the corporation, less about the team member. I'm a runner, not a very good runner, but a runner. And I always share this example. What gets me to run in the morning is the fact that I get an app notification from Strava, which is my running app. And it tells me my stats, my data. So the data were captured. How do we return the data back to the user? And how does that benefit them? I think we've been very selfish from a corporate world where we want to keep the data for us and figure out how we can do better with the data instead of saying, hey, this data belongs to the user. They're the one generating the data. Let's give it back. And in the consumer space, it's common. When you go on an app, a hospitality app, it will give you a lot of data around your metrics of traveling and so forth. Same thing with Strava, it gives me the data. The other thing that makes me run in the morning, other than the data, is the fact that my friends around the world already went running and they already did the effort. And I'm like, oh, I'm falling behind on performance. And I think it's no different in the workplace. If I'm remote and I constantly work remote, but I see my team members are going into the office, are participating to social events, are celebrating and praising, I feel like I'm left behind. And it is my own responsibility to say, I'm going to move myself and I'm going to go to the office. So I think the way to measure success and efficiency is by returning the information back to the users so they can take the right decision and make the right move that they think is going to be helpful for them. And at the same time, from an HR perspective, you're going to be able to measure whether users engage or disengage. Are they never coming in the office? And when they're going into their company intranet or the employee app, are they reacting? Are they celebrating? Are they praising? And based on that, you start to see, are they engaged? Do they seem like they're happy? It's not only about pure productivity, but are they going to stick around because they're happy people working for a great organization? And I think that's another way of measuring efficiency, which I think we're getting to in the cultural aspect of the corporations.
No, I'll just add to that. I mean, Zane, you mentioned that, software is about efficiency, but I don't think it's just about efficiency. It can definitely help us drive efficiency, but again, it can help us drive engagement. It can help us drive connection. It can help us, do so many things that are, provide additional functionality that people didn't have before. To some of Thomas's point, right? How do we enable things within the organization that weren't happening before? A great example over the last couple of years is, not just about people coming into work, but how often are people coming in and getting together socially, right? How do we see people consuming more casual spaces, like how many people are eating in the cafeteria at lunchtime? How many people are using, more social lounging areas within the organization? So, as an indication of how much of this non-formal collaboration is going on. And are we increasing the use or increasing the likelihood of that to happen within the organization, and giving more opportunities for ideas to flow between departments and things like that. So I think there's many different ways that measurement can be done. But I think going back to my original point is, going in with some of this stuff with a clear idea of what is it that we want to drive, right? Is it efficiency? Is it engagement? Is it more social interaction in the office? Is it better information distribution for people to turn up when there is a all hands with the CEO or the site leader or something like that? Having those things very clearly mapped out to start with, and then implementing with those goals in mind.
I was the HR leader for a research organization in the past, and it was a challenging environment. Everything was future focused, and the one thing that we were doing to save money was we canceled the 4:00 coffee. And I wasn't part of the decision, but it seemed like I was the complaint desk immediately after it happened. For researchers, scientists, engineers, right? They said, you have no clue. This was where we collaborated. This is where we came up with new ideas. This is where we partnered across teams and came up with the new things that are setting the direction for the next 5 to 15 years. So that was all of like 3 days before it was reinserted. But thinking about, what's the value you're getting out of it? I love what you just said. One more question at least. So the employee value proposition, the EVP, it's ever evolving. It's changing with, hybrid and remote. It's now, flexible benefits, AI, there are a variety of things that come into play. What role does technology play in attracting and retaining talent in such a rapidly changing workplace? Michael, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll happy to take that one. In our organization specifically, right, we're an organization of 720 something thousand now. We recruit somewhere between 40 and 100,000 people every year into the organization. Many of them, in the younger generation, straight out of college, and people are making decisions now based on the type of environment they're going to. Right? Are you a Microsoft shop? Are you a Google shop? Do you use Zoom? Some of the younger generation are using these things to make decisions about organizations that they join, right? What tools is it that I have to use? do you still using keys to get into the building, or are you using your phone? Can I use my watch? So experience and digital tools we see is becoming part of the employee value proposition. To, at least for us, that the many of the people that we're looking to attract to come and work at the organization, how technologically forward are we, right? What, both from a policy perspective, but also from an implementation and a use of tools and technology. So it's one of the reasons why we're very focused on staying at the forefront of this. We recruited and trained more than 50,000 people during COVID with in the metaverse, for example. And it was a big attraction tool for us, and to encourage people that were looking to go into consulting around what's an organization that's on the forefront of technology and that's using cool tools. So for us, that's one of the areas that we see them making a decision based on the type of tools and technologies that are available to them.
Just ensuring that the technology is enhancing the employee experience and not hindering it in any kind of way. I think that's really important. We should be able to see processes that are streamlined because of technology, providing those collaboration tools, enabling remote work, I think is a big one. Especially after COVID, people don't want to work in the office if they can, 5 days a week. So those hybrid environments where you kind of can have a flavor of both working remotely or in an office, or have opportunity maybe to travel to, an office every so often. But those flexible work arrangements, I think, are really what's going to attract new talent. And then having those flexible spaces within the office environment too. I don't remember, maybe Michael, is you, but someone had mentioned about, kind of like lounge areas, or maybe there's a cafe or a cafeteria that you're actually working and you're not sitting at your desk in your cube all day long, or an office with the door shut, because otherwise, why do you come in? Having those spaces available and also encouraging people to use them, I think really is going to be a big factor in whether or not someone decides they want to work for a company or go elsewhere that has those community building aspects.
Yeah, maybe to close on this question, I think we have a responsibility to make everyone a first citizen of the modern workplace. And I think there are still a lot of organizations that treat frontline workers, front desk workers differently, or even consultants working in the organization or visitors differently. And I think everyone should have access to the right information in a timely manner, as we talked earlier, the ability to have access to the right workplace services when applicable. And it shouldn't be a question of, do I have a license or not? And it's still very common. If you don't have a company email address, well, you don't get access to the internet. You don't get access to a lot of the information. And that doesn't seem right if you're building something around employee culture. If you want a strong culture, make everyone a first citizen of the modern workplace. And I think that comes with this idea of this consumerized workplace experience that I talked about earlier. We need to break the barrier from corporate to consumer. There's no difference. My home experience is better than my office. In fact, it should be the opposite, because we're throwing much more money in the office than we are in our homes. But yet we do everything on our homes with our phone. We control our lights, our air conditioning. We're notified when someone enters the house. Everything is automated and easy. So I think we have a responsibility there to bridge the gap between the two. And that will help. We love to say employees thrive, which I think is what we want. We want our kids to thrive. We want our employee to thrive. And for that, we need a consumer experience. So
I know we have a question in this. How do you align employee experience with the attributes you're talking about? And how do you map, measure, design to these desired experiences? And then her follow-up was building a business case for the economic accretive value is critical. We can show the investment in HR employee experience, how it drives value creation faster than investments in non-HR initiatives. So are you having discussions around the workplace experience and the collaborative team here, and how to prioritize that investment over investing elsewhere?
Yeah, maybe I'll take a swing at it to start with, Zane. I think that when we work with clients that are either trying to deploy new technology or build new tools or build new workplaces, or design what their move from traditionally being a desk-based environment to a shared workspace environment. All of these things, there's kind of a yin and a yang for a lot of it, right? It's how can we improve experience while also making operations more efficiently. And some of that's through information access. Some of that is through streamlining of processes. Some of that is through, even with information access, and, Thomas mentioned about how do we consumerize experiences. Some of that has got to do with information access about the employees. So if the employees are willing to, take a few more extra steps of providing information or deciding that they are going to make a reservation before they come to the office, what are they going to get on the back end of that, right? They're going to get a more personalized experience. They're going to have the space that they need, or the devices that they need on the desk, and things like that. So thinking on both sides of those, of what am I going to save from an efficiencies and an operations perspective? Maybe it's less space, but on the flip side of that, I'm going to give you a better experience, more services, better displays, more screens, more rooms with video conferencing technologies in them, for the trade-off of whatever extra work that you're looking for them to do. So designing for both sides of those, I think, is important, and where we've seen success.
Maybe to add, Michael, I think we've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to sprint here. But I think we've got to assess what communication tools and what workplace management tools are used within an organization today. And I think very quickly you're going to see that instead of getting a better ROI, you could do some substantial savings if you were to consolidate a lot of point products. So in the comms, you have an intranet, you have an employee app, you have Microsoft Teams, you have email, you have digital signage. They're all communication channels that are more or less efficient, that often 90% of the time work in silos. They're not integrated, which means you need to do the work multiple times, and you're not getting the same efficiency and the same metrics that you would need. I think there's an opportunity to consolidate across a platform that would allow HR or comms to produce the content and distribute the content across multiple communication channels and cross-link. Workplace management is the same thing. You have a room booking, you have Outlook, you have a desk booking, you have a smart locker booking, you have a different parking system. You have a badge to enter a building. I mean, you have so many different tools, and they all work in silos, which means that you've got to do as an employee multiple things to get to a perfect user experience. That costs a lot of money from a team member effectiveness, from an operational standpoint, and from a licensing. And I think there's an opportunity to consolidate, because today there are platforms, and I'm going to preach from my own chapel, but companies like AppSpace build platforms that have those as services of the platform. They're not point products. So when you buy one of the tools, you actually get all the other tools. And I think doing that assessment before deciding to implement new tech to figure out how you reduce the cost that you have and improve efficiency is substantial, and will even improve more your ROI down the line.
This is perfect. I'm going to do a 20-second wrap. How's that sound? So Alexa set the stage with context dependent, a call to action for all of us. We talked about just in time, employee centric and focused, or personalized experience, consumerized employee experience. You guys got me excited about where this is going for the future. So thank you for being the focus forward or future oriented leadership, because I want the things that we're talking about here, and I don't think they're 5 years out. I think they're 12 to 24 months out, and or happening in some companies now. We talked about tech enhanced or tech enabled. We talked about change management and the importance of communications throughout the process. It can't just be buy it and throw it in. It's got to be managed through, and how the employee value proposition is going to be enhanced through all of the partnership and work going on. So, boy, that's a quick summary of a lot of conversation. I took a ton of notes. Thank you all. I appreciate it.